So, even though I've lived in Dallas for the last 15 years of my life, I actually grew up in Houston, and that's the city where I first learned to drive. Now, I'm not sure how people drive where you're from, but in Houston, drivers can be a little bit aggressive. You see, for starters, there's just a lot of drivers on the road, and that means a lot of traffic. And having lived and driven in a few different cities now, I noticed something that Houston drivers don't do that drivers in other cities will do. They don't use their turn signals when they're trying to change lanes on the highway. You want to know why? It's because in Houston, you don't want other drivers to know what you're planning to do. You see, using your turn signal is kind of like tipping your hand. The moment you turn your blinker on and want to change lanes, it's like a guarantee that the car in that lane is going to speed up and make it hard for you to get in front of them. So what happens is you get a bunch of drivers tailgating one another, following each other way too close, making sure people don't cut in front of them. And other people trying to change lanes, squeezing into these really tight spaces that cars really shouldn't be able to fit into. That is the utter chaos that is known as everyday traffic in Houston. Now, maybe that's how it is in the city where you live. But can you imagine what it would be like to drive around others that never use their turn signal, or worse, if they never stayed in their lane, or that there were no traffic signs or lights to tell you where to go or how to know who was going to go where? What if you had to drive in a place that was a complete free-for-all, totally unregulated, no common rules, no respect for boundaries, no structure to keep order amidst all that's going on the roads that we drive on? Just confusion and chaos where everyone just operated by their own set of rules. Well, that's exactly what fighting in marriage can be like. The Wild West, where there's no law, no order, no structure to things. You see, most couples don't like the idea of conflict. It's not something enjoyable or a thing that couples would prefer to do. But just like driving on the highway and fighting through traffic, getting from point A to point B, it's something that we all will have to do. Now, if you've been married for pretty much any period of time, then you know that conflicts are a necessity. But kind of like with driving, if you know how to use the roads and you know how to use your car, it can be something incredibly beneficial for your marriage. Yeah, that's right. Conflicts aren't only necessary, but helpful if they're done right. But notice I said if done right. You see, most of us don't enter into marriage with any training on how to fight. And if you think about it, the only places where we ever could have learned to fight before we got married is going to probably be from our parents, which for most of us wasn't exactly the best model for healthy fighting. Because of that, most of us don't have a framework for what's healthy or even normal. Most fights happen in private and in isolation, so we never get a sense for how to do conflict well. It's more common for people to just rely on old habits and what comes natural to them in fighting, reinforcing more bad habits and over time creating a backlog of damage and hurt in their marriage. But you know what? To make matters worse, most couples operate off of completely different expectations and rules for what's fair fighting in the marriage. What's normal and acceptable is a lot of times completely different between husband and wife. I mean, imagine sticking a driver from the US with a driver from the UK, then putting them in a car that neither one knows how to drive on a busy road in China. That's pretty much how marriage conflicts can often go and how out of hand they can get. Two people using less than healthy fighting methods, working off of completely different scripts, hoping somehow for the best outcome. Now, a lot of times, couples just learn to figure it out. There might be some bumps and bruises along the way, but hopefully a couple learns to communicate and work through their fights. But I've been doing marriage counseling for over 12 years now, and over the time, as I've sat across countless couples, it becomes easy to start picking up patterns and common mistakes that couples will make. And one thing that stands out to me through the years is how confusing and complex conflicts can become. You see, a couple might start off their conflict on one thing, and in a matter of a few minutes, they're completely somewhere else fighting about something totally different. And in those few minutes, as they've shifted their conflict, they've managed to say a few things that have instigated 5 more fights along the way. You see, conflicts can snowball out of control that quickly. I mean, think about it like this. Imagine trying to travel down a major highway packed with other drivers, but without any clear lanes or traffic laws to help guide you through it all. And imagine you were just a student driver, that you were thrown behind the wheel of a car without any training or experience, suddenly finding yourself being forced onto this highway and trying to figure things out as you go. Sounds like a surefire way to get into a lot of accidents and to get hurt, which is exactly how it is for a lot of couples when it comes to the arena of conflict in their marriage. There are a lot of fast-moving issues in marital conflict, many of them layered and interconnected with other issues, and some of them highly charged and explosive as well. The reason why conflicts in marriage can oftentimes feel like dangerous highways is because marriage runs deep and hits way closer to home than any other relationship. Meaning, you let your spouse into the most deep, intimate, and even painfully tender parts of your life. So it makes sense why conflicts in marriage can be so complicated and painful at the same time. When you add intense emotions, higher stakes, and years of damage and unresolved conflicts, things can get complex and charge way more than you might realize. Now, when we stop to take a look at conflict from this standpoint, it'd be foolish to think that putting two people with deep and layered hurts in their lives together isn't somehow going to lead to pain and some fender benders along the way. So, if we have no rules to guide us on the highway of marriage, and it's super easy to get lost and confused and experience a number of accidents in the process of conflict, what are we to do? What's the solution to this issue that clearly affects so many couples to the tune of a 50% divorce rate in the US? Over my time as a marriage counselor, but also as a husband to my own wife that's had to have my own fair share of conflicts, I've developed a structure and a set of rules to help couples sort out and bring some order to their fighting. Now, is there something magical about this structure that I've developed over the years? No. No more than the traffic laws in the US are any better or worse than those in Australia. But the point here is that there is a set of rules to guide the process, and having both husband and wife operating off the same rules is crucial. Half the battle in marriage conflict is getting both husband and wife on the same page and using the same set of rules for fighting. If anything, this lesson is meant to help you and your spouse learn a set structure, the same terminology, and game plan for your conflicts. At the very least, you'll be working off the same map instead of completely missing each other in your conflicts. Now, the truth is, I could have created a course on a number of other issues when it comes to marriage. I could have gone with boundaries in marriage, working through common issues like in-laws, finances, or sex. But the reason why I started with this course on how to do conflict is because first, it's the most common problem or issue that couples have in their marriage. Seriously, hands down, that is the number one reason why couples come in for marriage counseling. And I'm willing to bet that you're probably drawn to this particular course on conflict simply because conflict is a common felt need for most every couple, and it's one that you're probably experiencing yourself. And the reason why it's such a commonly felt need is because most of us know, regardless of what other issues that we might have going on or that we could possibly be going through, if we can't communicate, if we can't handle conflicts well, then nothing gets resolved in marriage. The second reason why I started with a course on conflict is because conflict is the gateway to growth. What you'll find, whether you like it or not, is that in order to do conflict better, you'll have to take a hard look at yourself. Many times, doing conflict means revealing your own shortcomings and areas of hurt that need to be healed and addressed. So while most couples come in for counseling looking for help to communicate better, what they'll find is that they're having a hard time communicating because they really need to work on themselves first. What you'll quickly realize is, as you start going through this course, is that there are a number of things that will be exposed as areas of weakness and things that you'll need to grow in if you want to do conflict better. What I'm trying to say here is half the benefit of a course like this is that it'll help you to fight better in your marriage. That much is obvious. But the other benefit is that it'll force you to grow and to mature as a person in general. That is, after all, one of the things that marriage does. Marriage acts like a mirror, and it demands that we look at the uglier parts of ourselves and to learn how to become better versions of ourselves. I'm telling you that now so that you can keep that as a reminder in your back pocket. We'll get into how to do conflict in this series, but as we go through it together to help improve your marriage, just remember that this is going to be about growing you as a person as well, not just how to communicate and connect better with your spouse. All right, the last thing I want to emphasize here is the importance of doing more than just watching these videos. You can just watch these videos and listen to them on your drive home or while you're cooking dinner. But if you really want to get the most out of this course, I strongly recommend that you do the workbook along with these videos. Now, in the workbook, you'll find valuable exercises and reading that will help to reinforce your learning here. And even more so, if you can do this course and the workbook in a discussion group or with a marriage coach or a counselor, that would be the way to get the most out of these lessons. So be sure to follow along with those additional resources to get the best results. Okay, with that said, let's buckle in for the ride and start learning your rules of engagement.